Let's get right into it. Former United States President Donald Trump has described the verdict in his historic hush money trial as rigged and disgraceful. Speaking at a press conference following his conviction on 34 counts of falsifying business records, he reiterates his innocence, claiming the witnesses were literally crucified in the case, as he slammed the judge yet again as being highly conflicted and for being a tyrant. Mr. Trump said the real verdict is going to be given on November 5 by the people, and they know what happened here. He makes history as the first American president, past or present, to be convicted of a crime. But despite this criminal record, he can still run for president and assume office. The trial sets Mr. Trump to become the first president to be charged and convicted of a crime.
This was a rigged trial by a conflicted judge who was corrupt. It's a rigged trial, a disgrace. They wouldn't give us a venue change. We were at 5% or 6% in this district, in this area. This was a rigged, disgraceful trial. But the real verdict is going to be November 5th by the people. And they know what happened here, and everybody knows what happened here. You have a Soros-backed DA, and the whole thing, we didn't do a thing wrong. I'm a very innocent man, and it's okay. I'm fighting for our country. I'm fighting for our Constitution. Our whole country is being rigged right now. This was done by the Biden administration in order to wound or hurt an opponent, a political opponent. And I think it's just a disgrace. And we'll keep fighting. We'll fight till the end, and we'll win.
Meanwhile, some supporters and opponents of Mr. Trump clashed in New York City ahead of that final verdict. Anti-Trump protesters held banners and placards reading, "Not above the law, election interference is a crime." Prior to the verdict, the former Republican president, who is set to face off against Democratic incumbent Joe Biden in November's election, had constantly pleaded not guilty.
I'm predicting an acquittal. I'm kind of happy that there's a couple of lawyers on the jury because, again, this is a travesty of the judicial system. We're supposed to respect the judges, DAs, prosecutors, lawyers. But this is such a travesty. It's a humiliation of the law. And I'm hoping that these two lawyers, at least on that jury, see the repercussions of what's going to happen if they don't acquit him.
So I'm really happy. I'm really glad that the jury came back with that verdict because they had to go through the evidence and make a very serious determination where I could off the top of my head say, oh, the guy's guilty, but they had to sit through the trial. And now it's up to the judge to determine what the proper punishment for these crimes is. And I leave it in his hands. He's a good judge. He's very fair. And I'm just happy that Trump was held accountable, finally.
Well, let's unpack all of this. Joining us now is national security, law and foreign policy expert Joanna LeBlanc. Thank you for joining us today. She joins us from Washington, D.C.
Thank you for having me on.
Right, so we know that you have quite a lot to share regarding this. But first, what do you make of this verdict? I mean, this is quite historical, as it's the first time a former or serving U.S. president is being convicted of a crime.
Absolutely. I think that Mr. Trump's name should be next to the word, should be synonymous to the word unprecedented. His presidency was unprecedented. The way he ruled the country was unprecedented. And now becoming the first former president to have been convicted of a crime and is now a felon. And so I think that what it shows to the world is that, yes, here in America, no one is above the law. I think it sends a message to the United States international partners that here in the United States, there is a justice system that regardless of your wealth, regardless of your position of power, you can be convicted of a crime. So because I know that there's been a great deal of conversation in the international community about the United States global standing as a superpower, considering all of the challenges the United States has faced. You know, you talk about the insurrection that took place on Capitol Hill. So I think this is a good message for the Biden administration.
And let's understand this a little bit more. He's been convicted. How is it that he's now able to still, you know, go through the elections, run, and he can actually become president if he wins if he wins the race in November?
Well, the Constitution is very clear. It does not preclude a convicted felon from running for the presidency or even becoming the president of the United States. Now, what's going to happen next is that Mr. Trump will have his sentencing day, which is set for July 11th. And he is facing 4 years for 4 years jail time for 34 counts that he was convicted of. But the reality is that I don't think that Mr. Trump is going to jail. I think what's probably going to happen is that he will be placed on probation, be fined, and have to report to court, to his probation officer, rather. And there will be some restrictions. There could be some restrictions on his movement. And the question is that Mr. Trump is running a political campaign. He's the front runner for the Republican Party. And usually when you are on probation, you have to report to your resident by a certain time. So this is unprecedented. It has never been done before, but I don't believe that the judge will send Mr. Trump to prison because he still has to have Secret Service with him, and taxpayers have to pay for that. And it can be very difficult to be a warden of a jail and to have to deal with Secret Service. It's going to create a great deal of distraction for other inmates in prison, and also for those who are in leadership. So more than likely, he will be fined and be placed on probation as a first-time offender. But what's also interesting is that in the state of Florida, which is where Mr. Trump is a resident of, a convicted felon is not allowed to vote. So Mr. Trump will not be allowed to vote in November during the presidential election.
And Mr. Trump has, called the verdict a disgrace. He called it rigged. He said the witnesses were crucified, in his words, during when he was talking outside the Trump Tower. He said that even attacked the judge who presided over the case. He had previously said that it was a political witch hunt. What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think Mr. Trump from the beginning has always maintained his innocence. And he has always said that all of the indictments, not just for this case, but other cases in Georgia and in other parts of the United States, have all been a witch hunt, and that he is being politically persecuted. And his base also believes so. In fact, after Mr. Trump's guilty verdict yesterday, his campaign website crashed because so many donations were flowing in. And his base remained committed to Mr. Trump. They're not going to not support him as a result of this. All right. And Mr. Trump could very well become the next president of the United States, because the incumbent here in the United States is facing some challenges regarding some of his foreign policy position, which will cause folks not necessarily to vote for Trump, but there will be some folks who will stay home and not vote. And staying home and not vote for Mr. Biden is automatically a vote for Mr. Trump, because we saw that's what happened in 2016. People were not necessarily pleased with Hillary Clinton, so they stayed home, and that's how Mr. Trump became the president of the United States. And we're seeing the same thing possibly happening during this election, because again, Mr. Biden is facing a very tough upcoming election because of some of his domestic policy and foreign policy position around the world.
Well, some still believe that convicting him is the only way Democrats can win the election. What do you think?
Well, convicting him is one thing, right? As I said earlier, his base remains energized and committed. Now, are there some people that I believe who could potentially be swayed to not vote for a convicted felon? Absolutely. But the reality is that the incumbent here in America is under a great deal of pressure by the American public, especially when you look at the youth and who are just really unhappy with foreign policy position that the administration has taken, right? Yes, a conviction is a stain on Mr. Trump's record, but those who are going to vote for Mr. Trump will vote for Mr. Trump regardless. And again, the Constitution does not bar one from becoming president, even if he were incarcerated. He could still become president. And I think that it's because the Constitution never anticipated us to be in such a position. But as I always say, democracy is one that is incredibly fragile. It is one that needs to be nurtured continuously. And I think America is being tested right now. America's democracy is being tested. America's integrity is being tested. The American voters are being tested right now. And I think November, we shall see what the American people really think and what the American people really feel. Because at the end of the day, the voters have the final say-so as to who will become the next president of the United States of America.
Yes, and Joanna, during the last elections, you know, all the candidates, by the time the parties chose their candidates, you will see them, you know, on the campaign trail, ramping up votes and, you know, what have you. What you've just spoken about, what you spoke about a couple of minutes ago, says it's unprecedented because never before has Americans seen a candidate who will not be able to campaign fully because of a conviction hanging on their neck. So how will the Trump camp be able to re-strategize? What do they need to do to ensure that even if he was not up there speaking to the people, they can still run a good campaign running up till November?
Certainly. Well, what I think is going to happen on sentencing day on July 11th is that I think the judge has to be very careful on what kind of restrictions that he imposes on Mr. Trump, because at the end of the day, he is indeed running for the president of the United States, and he is the preferred candidate for the Republican Party and the leading candidate for the Republican Party as of right now. So the judge will have to be very mindful to not appear as if the court is interfering in the election process, right? Because it could be a backlash for the Democratic Party, right? Some will say that they're trying to tie him down because they're trying to keep him as busy as possible so that he can't campaign and ultimately can't win the election. So what could happen is that the judge could, whatever he's sentenced to, they could wait until after the election for sentencing to start, or maybe even after he becomes president. If that were to happen, sentencing could happen. But I think that the judge has to be very careful because you don't want to appear that you are interfering in the election, in the electoral process, right? Because it's a very dynamic, it's a very delicate position to be in as a judge presiding over this case. But as we all know, it wasn't the judge that convicted him. It was a jury of his peers. But nonetheless, the judge has to walk a very fine line when he announces the sentencing on July 11th. And if Mr. Trump's movements are somewhat restricted, I am confident that Mr. Trump is going to take this conviction and use it to his benefit to show to the American people that, listen, I am being persecuted just like so many of you. This system is unfair. It is biased. And when I become president, I'm going to make some changes. And the reality is that for many people in this country, especially people of color, they are not pleased with the American justice system. They feel as though it unfairly targets people of a certain background, and that sometimes the sentencing are disproportionate to the crime that's been committed, and so forth. So he'll be able to relate to a lot of people in this country because of his conviction, and therefore he could use that as leverage as he campaigns around the United States.
Right, Joanna, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Let's move ahead. Slovakia's Prime Minister Robert Fico has been moved from a hospital in the center of the country to his home week after surviving an assassination attempt. The hospital in the central city of Banska Bystrica said he was now receiving home nursing care. According to officials, he was airlifted to the capital, Bratislava, and taken home to continue his long road to recovery. The 59-year-old was shot 4 times after a government meeting earlier this month and was left fighting for his life. Mr. Fico is said to have undergone a number of operations. The veteran politician, who has served as Prime Minister for more than 10 of the last 18 years, returned to power last September at the head of a populist national coalition. Residents and members of parliament in New Caledonia have been reacting to French President Emmanuel Macron's intention to hold another referendum on the country's future. This follows Mr. Macron's visit to assess the situation in New Caledonia as deadly violence broke out across the country, killing at least 7 people and wounding 100 others. The riots erupted following electoral reforms passed in Paris that some claim will erode the influence of the island's indigenous community. And several people have died due to heat-related ailments over the past 24 hours as temperatures continue to soar in northern and central India. According to authorities, heat stroke-related deaths have also been reported from the states of Bihar, Rajasthan and Jharkhand and the national capital, Delhi. Temperatures soared past 50 degrees Celsius in many states, and that's 7.5 degrees above normal, prompting authorities to issue a red alert for the country's northwest area. Locals are coping by pouring water on themselves, drinking cold beverages, and swimming in pools of the amusement parks. The searing heat comes as India is holding its general election, the results of which will be declared on the 4th of June. More stories from the United States, which is the spokesperson, Matthew Miller, has condemned the Georgian parliament's decision to override a veto on the controversial foreign agent law. Mr. Miller says the action threatens Georgia's aspirations for EU membership and its relationship with the United States. Western nations, including the US, UK and EU, have criticized the legislation, with the EU warning that the law is not in line with EU core norms and values and would negatively impact Georgia's progress towards EU membership.
The Georgian parliament voted to override the Georgian president's veto of an anti-democratic foreign influence bill that fails to conform to European norms, effectively turning the bill into law. The United States condemns this action. In passing this law, the ruling Georgian Dream Party moved the country farther away from the European integration path and ignored the Euro-Atlantic aspirations of the Georgian people, who have taken to the streets for weeks to oppose this law. The Georgian Dream has disregarded the Council of Europe's Venice Commission legal assessment and that of Georgia's closest partners, who made clear their concerns that the law would stigmatize civil society and media and limit fundamental freedoms. The ruling party's actions and anti-Western rhetoric threaten Georgia's democratic trajectory, future economic security, EU membership, and also put the U.S.-Georgia relationship at risk. This week, Secretary Blinken announced that anyone who undermines democratic processes or institutions in Georgia, as well as their immediate family members, may be found ineligible for U.S. visas under a newly announced policy precluding travel to the United States. The United States continues to stand by the Georgian people as they work for a democratic and Western future. It is unfortunate that Georgia's leaders are choosing to forego the steps needed to advance Georgia in the Western direction that its people want.
It appears the ruling party of South Africa, the African National Congress, is close to losing its majority in parliament with more than 65% of results declared. The ANC has 42% of the vote. The party had always polled above 50% in all elections since 1994. This is a first for the party since it came to power 30 years ago. Just after the ANC is the Democratic Alliance, polling 23% nationally. The MK party of former President Jacob Zuma has received 12% of the vote, and the Economic Freedom Fighters Party about 10%. Final results are expected over the weekend. If the ANC is unable to get at least 50%, it would be forced to go into a coalition with one or more of the other parties in order to form a majority in Parliament. Well, as the vote tally for South Africa's election continues, Johannesburg residents have been expressing their hopes and their concerns ahead of the final results.
I didn't vote because of our leaders are too corrupt. When I vote, it seems like I'm not voting because there's no change. From 1994, ANC has been in power instead of developing or undeveloping. And which is a risk to us as South Africans, because now we've lost job opportunities right now. I'm a young child. I'm 22 years old. I have a bachelor's degree. I can't even go to school. I can't find work. Who's there to blame? But it's them, the politics. They are too corrupt. They say. I think the conditions they are trying to start won't benefit anything. Because still, ANC will still be in power. Those leaders which are corrupt will still be in power. The only thing we need is to change the whole parliament. Because in my own view, I think those leaders, all of them, majority of them are corrupt. Nothing is happening to our country. There's no improvement in our country. We are undeveloping. Check South Africa now. Honestly speaking, check the thing of foreigners, unemployment, poverty. It's at its high stakes.
The condition, I don't think that South African youth will benefit from this, because basically, like, if ANC and another party collides, there won't be any change, because when there's corruption, there's always be corruption. Maybe the ANC will corrupt the other parties.
If the ANC continues running, by the stats, obviously, it has to shake them up. It has to shake them. At some point, they need to see, probably they'll realize how much they need to fix, how much they need to implement. I mean, it's not that they haven't done anything entirely or everything is just chaos, but then we need accountability. So I think by their margin going thin, and then others are increasing, it should tell them something.
Hopefully we can get the corrupt out and people that are actually willing to do the job in and get the skill back into the country.
Still ahead on the program. Well, it's no worries for this giant panda cub as it splashes around in the pool and captivates onlookers at a zoo in Moscow. We'll bring you details of that and others in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. Football is big business in Europe, and especially this summer as the Euro Cup takes over the continent. But while the national teams are preparing for the big tournament, a sponsorship deal in Germany's Bundesliga is making quite that stir. Borussia Dortmund is one of Germany's top teams, and they found a new sponsor in Rheinmetall. Lars Holter is with Deutsche Welle and joins us now from Berlin. Lars, tell us what is so special about this sponsorship.
Well, the issue is with who exactly that sponsor is, because Rheinmetall is Germany's largest defense contractor. They're producing mainly wheeled and tracked military vehicles, such as the Lynx infantry tank, the Fuchs armored personnel carrier. It also has a huge weapons and ammunition division, and its electronic solutions division focuses on digitalization of the military. So this is truly a cutting-edge company, but in a field that has never been seen doing advertising on such a scale. Now, Now, initially, Rheinmetall even thought about advertising on the team's jerseys, but they're not doing that just yet for now. It's only within the stadium. Now, obviously, fans aren't happy about that. They're mostly saying that this is a terrible fit and that a defense contractor as a sponsor brings politics and even topics like war and death into what is supposed to be a fun pastime activity, watching football. Some, of course, are also pointing out that this will bring in a rumored 20 million euros, and if Dortmund wouldn't take it, some other team likely would. Meanwhile, German Economic Secretary Robert Habeck says this is where we're at. This is the times we're in, that obviously within Russia's invasion of Ukraine 2 years ago, we've reached a turning point in our society, and that the military now is front and center of our politics and our economy today.
But this is not the first controversial sponsorship deal in football, is it?
No, it is most certainly not. There have been partnerships before that fans especially hated. Some are with companies, for example, offering sports betting, something that can easily grab football fans and turn them into gamblers. Now, gambling obviously being highly addictive behavior. But to be more political, we've also seen the state of Qatar being a main sponsor of football in recent years. And if you blame Rheinmetall as a defense contractor for benefiting from war, you'd most certainly have to criticize the government of Qatar for using football sponsorships to paint a friendly picture of a country that has a dismal human rights record. Sports washing is what that is often called, using advertising in a friendly environment pretty much as a propaganda tool to make the world look the other way and ignore a country's problematic policies.
Lars, are there any rules at all as to who can sponsor a football team or a tournament in Europe?
Yes, there are indeed rules, but they seem to be kind of benign. The rules in Germany, for example, are prohibiting sports advertising for anything that touches on partisan politics and religion. Anything with ties to pornography and racism is out of the question, as are tobacco products and alcohol. That is at least strong alcoholic products. Beer, of course, isn't banned at all, and that would be hard to do in a country like Germany, where beer is often considered one of the main food groups. In fact, the breweries are among the main sponsors of the German league. They have many of the teams under contract, and fans are just fine with that. They enjoy the product. They do not, however, enjoy being reminded of life outside the stadium, it seems, as this uproar now over the Rheinmetall deal is showing.
Lars, thank you for your time. Let's move on to other stories now. Nigeria startup Legit Car Africa is helping individuals and businesses avoid buying or handling vehicles stolen from other people. The digital service helps users buy the right vehicles by collecting and presenting vehicle history data to them. More details in this next report.
This Nigerian tech startup is aiming to solve the problem of vehicle theft and improve the car buying process for both individuals and businesses.
It's not what they're doing, but why?
By offering an automated system to check the theft status of vehicles, the service aims to ensure that stolen vehicles cannot be resold to innocent car buyers or used illegally by someone else.
We provide access to critical vehicle data required for vehicle purchase decisions, vehicle insurance decisions, and data for effective law enforcement.
The story behind Legit Car Africa began in 2017 with a personal experience of the founder.
It was in 2017. I wanted to buy the car I currently use. I saw a car I liked. The price was fantastic. But then, when I tried to confirm that the vehicle was not stolen from someone else, there was no way to do that. And that surprised me, because I never believed there's no fast and reliable way to be sure you're not buying a vehicle that will get you into trouble. So I saw that gap. When I left the car dealer's place, I thought to myself, okay, now this is a huge problem that we could find solutions to. And I called a few of my friends who knew their way around tech. At the time, I couldn't even on a computer. So there's been tremendous growth anyway. So we now sat a couple of times, thought around how to solve this huge problem, and Legit Car Africa was born.
With insufficient local vehicle production, Nigeria depends highly on imports to meet demand. And although the country's car market size, especially for used vehicles also known as tokumbo, is high, there isn't enough reliable vehicle data for buyers to work with when making transactions. The team at Legit Car Africa decided to address this problem head-on.
When we started Legit Car, it was about enabling car buyers not fall into the problem of buying vehicles that have been stolen from other people. But then we quickly moved on from there. We moved on to become a vehicle data company, meaning that our data is used for vehicle purchase, for vehicle insurance, even for law enforcement. So our data and our service have improved from when we were just doing a stolen vehicles database to data for decision making and the likes. But then we quickly realized data is not meant to sit in silos. So we connected our platform to data from a couple of other vehicle history companies, and that gave us access to a lot of, in fact, billions of vehicle history data.
For a vehicle data service, the major challenge they faced was accessing accurate and timely data necessary to help close the loop on criminal activities involving vehicles.
One of the biggest problems we have in Nigeria, not just in Nigeria, in Africa, is data. There's almost no data for anything. If I ask you the number of cars we have in Nigeria now, I can tell you don't know. And the way you don't know, the way like 98% of people in Nigeria don't know. The people who should know even do not know. Sometimes we say we don't even know the number of people we have here in Nigeria. So data is a huge problem. There was no way for us to connect to an existing data and make our journey easier. So we had to start putting together the data by ourselves. So data collection was was the initial challenge we faced. And it was big because we started reaching out to organizations who had this data in bits and pieces. We started talking to law enforcement. We started talking to insurance companies. We started talking to people who have lost vehicles. We started talking to vehicle recovery companies. So the data exists in fragments everywhere that are not usable, that can't serve any purpose. So we worked really hard to put together this data. Today we have about 2,000 of that. At some point we had just 10. Of course, we started with 1. So the journey from 1 to 10 to 500 to 2,000 was a very, very long and difficult journey.
For a vehicle data service, the major challenge they faced was accessing accurate and timely data necessary to help close the loop on criminal activities involving vehicles.
So our AI capability currently is able to scan a vehicle and detect where there are problems with the vehicle's body. So it can value a vehicle. It can also tell the average value of a vehicle, market value of a vehicle in monetary terms. It can also tell how much damage has been done to a vehicle by just scanning the body. So that removes the need for physical evaluation of vehicles.
But beyond providing vehicle data, they are also leveraging artificial intelligence, AI, to assess the physical condition and value of a vehicle. This removes the need for physical inspections during the insurance underwriting process.
But the ones with the red color notes shows that we need to check these things.
By providing data solutions and enhancing the vehicle purchase process, the startup is ensuring that car buyers are well informed during transactions, which in turn paves the way for a secure and efficient used car market.
And finally on the program, it's no worries for giant panda cub Katusha as it enjoyed playing with its mother in the water of the enclosure at a zoo in Moscow. You're looking at panda cub Katusha, mother Din Din, playing in an outdoor pool to the delight of visitors. Born in August last year, Katusha was named after the popular Russian folk song following a public vote on Moscow's online portal for residents. Her parents arrived in Moscow from Beijing in 2019. They live in the Chinese fauna pavilion at Moscow Zoo, which was inaugurated by Russian President Vladimir Putin and China's Xi Jinping. Giant pandas are protected by a worldwide conservation program. That's our show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Jacka Rogers.